So thank you for coming, Joe. I appreciate it. First of all, I want to know, is it Joe Sandow or is it Joe Saunders?
For the purpose of today, will be Joe Saunders. We can talk about what Joe Sandow gets up to as well.
Oh, okay. Is that a character-based thing you got? Or
More or less, yeah.
Is that the name for the pro wrestling announcer?
It is, yeah. That's the pro wrestling gimmick, but it's also a separation from my work life in case I say silly things on a comedic stage.
So when you're on the comedy stage, you're Joe Saunders.
No, Sandow for anything performance.
All right,
Yeah.
okay. So that you're trying to save your wife and children from any embarrassment. Sorry, I could not resist that joke.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, I understand. I don't know if you know this about me, but when I was young, I had a different stage name.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and the name Butch Reed.
Butch Reed?
Someone said it sounded like a lesbian book review, but I had to live with the name. It was a name I actually got when I was a kid as a nickname from my dad, and my birth name was Reed. So there you go.
Do you know there's a funny anecdote that ties into what we're going to talk about, but there's a very famous professional wrestler in the 70s and 80s named Butch Reed.
The Natural.
The Natural Butch Reed.
Yes,
there
with
you go.
blonde hair.
There you go.
I'm like,
Yeah.
you can't call
You've got
yourself the Natural and bleach your hair.
Similar physique as well. Just,
Oh, yeah. Oh, you didn't. Oh, one of these days I will show you photos of what I used to look like when I was a fighter.
All right, sounds good.
I've got this picture of my now ex-wife, but the Japanese girl I married, chasing me across the beach in a pair of budgie smugglers. And I'm like, yeah, there's a reason she's chasing me. The older I get, the better looking I used to be, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Anyway, so you started out, you told me when I first met you. I think I saw you the first time was at the sit-down comedies room in the Valley.
That's right, yeah.
What's it called?
The Parlour.
The Parlour, that's what it is, yeah. And you were talking then about your previous history as a judoka.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right.
I use the Japanese term, the judoka. Look at me.
Yeah, look at you.
So a practitioner of judo.
Correct.
And you got quite good, didn't you?
I did. Not as good as I wanted to get, but good enough that I've got some stories to tell about it, I suppose. But,
so where did you get to? What level?
So Shodan.
Represented Australia?
Yeah, represented Australia. So I represented Australia in 2005 at the Oceania World Cup. And then it led me into, I always cross-trained in other martial arts as well.
Right.
So I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu around 2005. Never got to representative level with that, but competed a lot in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and submission wrestling. A couple of years later, I got tapped on the shoulder by some friends that had gotten into sumo, amateur sumo. I'm a sumo.
Yeah.
And said there was a sumo association in Australia and some free trips on offer for people that were good at it. And,
wow.
I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. After I got over the subtle implication that I was fat.
What's the joke? Have you heard me do the joke?
No. What's that?
I went to Japan and I put on 10 kilos in the first year and then 20 kilos over the rest of the time I was there. And all the time I was watching sumo wrestling thinking, I'm not getting so fat. This is actually the body shape of an elite athlete.
That's right. But amateur sumo has weight divisions.
Yeah.
So I competed most of my judo career at about 120 kilograms.
Wow.
And,
that's a lot of weight to walk around with.
Yeah. I was relatively athletic at 100, 150, 120. About 117 is kind of my best athletic weight.
Yeah, you're a lot bigger than I am.
Yeah.
And I've put on a lot of weight. I was
Me too.
80s. For 5 years, I trained under 85 to get into tournaments.
Yep.
But it wasn't karate. It wasn't judo. It was karate.
Yeah.
But it was like the rebound effect, and I ended up, when I stopped, I just ballooned out.
Yeah.
But I walked around at 120 for 10 years. It just ruins your knees.
Yeah. So I got sumo. There's a weight division. Middleweight was 115 kilograms at the time. So I could. The only sport I could be middleweight.
I had to lose weight to get into 85. That was middleweight where I come from. Yeah, 110 is middleweight. 115. Wow, that's just mind-boggling.
So I went and competed at middleweight, and with a very light weight cut, a couple of kilos before each tournament.
Yeah.
And I got.
Did you get a rebound from it and end up bigger?
That was mostly to do with having kids and not training very much, to be honest.
Oh yeah, I could use that excuse
too.
So,
I don't know if I can blame.
I can blame my kids. Yeah.
I think I just got lazy.
My oldest son's got a couple of kids of his own now, and he's like 15 kilos heavier than he
was.
was.
Yep. So yeah, I got to represent Australia in sumo as well, and
with your dad bod.
and got to
That's well
got to go
done,
all sorts of
by the way,
places.
yeah.
Like I got to go to Russia, I got to go to Colombia, I got to go
Far
to
out. Is this all before
Dubai.
marriage and kids?
Some of it concurrent. My last international was just before my second daughter was born. So
Right. So you've got
yeah.
2 children, 3,
Four.
4 children.
Yeah, four. Yeah.
Two daughters.
4 daughters.
All daughters.
All girls. Yeah.
That what I've learnt about high-ranking athletes, predominantly female children.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
And what it boils down to is you're getting so worked physically all the time. You have a lower testosterone.
Yep.
Not testosterone. Testes aren't producing as much male sperm.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
And in any case, the female sperm lasts longer. So, the male sperm get there faster, but they don't always survive as long. It's like 3 to 5 days difference.
Yeah.
3 days for a male sperm and 5 days for a female sperm. And the more stress the male body is under, the less sperm is produced.
There you go. I have heard something similar too, because very common with a lot of the elite soldiers and sort of high performance law enforcement and military people I've worked with over the years have all seemed to have girls as well.
Yeah,
so.
It just shows how lazy I was when I was having kids. I got 2 boys straight up.
Yeah. No. That was my last international was late 2013. So it's going back a little
It's
bit now.
not actually too far. I mean, like we were a bit different in age, so that's not too far back for me.
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago now. I was like 2 states and three kids ago.
So where were you living before?
I did most of my sport in Queensland.
Yeah.
So I grew up here. I was here until I was 25, 26 maybe, something like that. And then
you'd already become Australian representative judo club
so
at that point.
all that stuff so far. Moved to Tasmania
Now there's a vast change, I'm going to imagine. Haven't been there myself, but
Yeah.
I've heard stories.
Yeah. So I moved to Tassie in 2013. Like about halfway, just before my last international, and I kind of knew it was going to be my last one. And so that was a trip to Russia. Did Russia, came back and
So you did Russia as a sumo?
at sumo, and then came back.
So you're touring doing demonstration fights or actual fights against people?
Actual fights. So it was a competition, World Combat Games.
And you got paid to be there, and you fed?
No, they paid. We didn't get paid to be there, but everything was covered. So
Your food and your accommodation
Everything
and
was
your
free,
travel was all free,
Yeah.
and all you had to do was go out there and wrestle with big Russian dudes.
yeah, actually, I never got to fight a Russian.
Who did you?
Yeah,
What? You went to Russia and you didn't fight a Russian?
No,
What?
I lost to. Who did I
Oh,
lose
you
to?
lost. Oh, well, let's
did
end the
lose.
interview
Yeah, I did
right
lose.
now.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear any more
I
of
think,
this.
I think I lost to Mongolia first round.
Oh, well,
I've got a bad
they're
run with
wrestling.
Mongolians. Yeah.
The Mongolian wrestlers that go to Japan kill.
Oh yeah, they do.
They do a different form of wrestling, which
So-
is like hours long.
There's a whole other story, depending how long your podcast is. I also represent Australia in belt wrestling, which is a belt wrestling.
Belt wrestling.
Yeah, which is it's a Eurasian sport. So basically, what it is throughout all of like the Soviet countries and the Eastern Bloc and that kind of the stands. There's a very big culture of different types of wrestling that involve either jackets or sashes or belts of some sort.
All right.
And what belt wrestling was basically an internationalized version of that to create an international rule set where all these different folk styles could compete and have like a world championships of sorts. So that's what belt wrestling was supposed to be. Now, do you want to hear the story of how this all came to be?
Yeah.
So,
That's what we're here
We are
for.
doing a podcast. So
You're supposed to tell the stories.
So many funny parts of this. So this is before I moved to Tassie. I've already represented Australia in judo and sumo. That's already on my resume.
Okay.
I had met a guy along the way who was into a lot of different traditional wrestling styles. Like if you've watched Dodgeball, there's like Obscure Sports Quarterly. Like if there was a wrestling version of that, he would have been the editor. Right? He knows all the different wrestling styles from all over the world, and he had these random connections all over the world in different wrestling styles. So I'm sitting at home.
In Tasmania?
No, this is still in Brisbane. It's still in Brisbane. My first daughter had just been born. She's about a month old. So I'm just gone back to work. Like life is chaos as you're trying to get used to have your baby at home and all that kind of stuff. And I get a phone call.
Hang on, when you say you had your baby at home, she was born at home, or you?
Oh no, so she's born. In the
She's
hospital.
back from the hospital now.
She's at home, and we're just getting used to life. Right? And so I get this phone call, and he says, how did you feel about representing Australia in belt wrestling? I said, what's belt wrestling? And he said, well, you know that competition we did, and I'd done this competition before. And he said, well, I think you're the best belt wrestler in Australia that might want to go to Kazakhstan. I said, okay.
Well done.
I'm like, okay, so please explain, because I haven't competed
You've
for a
impressed
while.
him.
What is this? He goes, so basically he says, just like judo, a bit of a cross between judo and sumo, but the International Belt Wrestling Association has these ambitions to be an Olympic recognised sport. And to be an Olympic recognised sport, they need to have a certain number of countries and continents represented at their World Championships. So they're willing to pay to have an Australian come, because we count as a whole continent and a country. So if we can nominate someone who can go and compete, they'll pay for it. I'm like, okay.
So you got a free trip overseas
Yeah,
again?
and I'm like, when is this? And he's like, it's in a month. I'm like,
I just had a baby, dude. Seriously.
I literally haven't trained in about 4 months. I don't even know what the sport is. I don't know what the rules are.
It's like judo. You just got told what it is.
Yeah, I've watched some.
You've got wrestling championships. You got
this is 2013, so I'm jumping on YouTube, and there's like some pretty grainy footage of something that. Like Kuresh is one of the styles, and I can see a little bit of Kuresh. I'm like, okay, kind of get what they're doing. Anyway, there's a whole thing. I could take one official with me, like one coach, administrator, whatever. And I chose Katrina, who is the president of the Australian Sumo Federation, because she also could speak Russian.
All right.
And I thought, being in Kazakhstan, I'd rather take someone who can speak Russian.
Yep,
She can do the diplomacy thing. So that'll be good. So Katrina and I get our free tickets to Russia,
and she's stoked.
Yeah, she's on board. It was all good.
Are you sure you're not running away from your wife trying to chat me up? Really? Are you?
So, literally up until, the organisation was going back and forth with this guy. Love him to death, but he is a Georgian,
as in Georgia the country,
as the Georgia the country, representing a Russian-based organisation, trying to send an Australian to Kazakhstan. And our communication back and forth was in English, but it was very broken English. And I realised that as we went along, I realised that what he was doing was actually taking what I was saying, feeding it into like an online translator, answering in Russian, putting his answer back into the translator and sending it back to me in English. So
some miscommunication potential.
And if anyone remembers online translators, like I don't know, 10 years ago, it wasn't fantastic.
Even today, when I make sure my daughter understands something in a text message, or I have to translate some communication from Japan, I put it into the text translation and I look at the kanji, the Japanese writing, and I go, okay, does that actually say what I want it to say, really? Because I can understand it reading and writing. It's not good, but I can understand what the words mean when I can say them. And they've got the little romaji underneath it, so I can say the kanji, and okay, that's exactly what I want to say. Yeah, good. Or I'll change it somewhat, but I don't trust it.
So I wasn't really convinced up until about a week beforehand that he actually knew I needed to fly out of Brisbane and not Sydney, and didn't think these places were the same. So I was really relieved when I got my flights through. I also didn't receive.
That would have been a bit testy.
I didn't receive a visa. I got my visa came through. My visa. This is another story. My visa came through. It was literally just a PDF document with a bunch of acrylic words, my face, and I can see my name, my passport
but
number.
You don't know what it says on
I don't know what it says, right?
I'm about to get put into a concentration camp, and I'm not sure.
It's my face, my
name,
this. My date of birth, my passport number, and the document is called Visa Saunders Australia. I'm like, okay, that's my visa, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm pretty inexperienced with this whole thing. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So finally get my flights through a couple of days beforehand, all happy days. I'm flying, because here's a trick for anyone who is going to get someone else paying for your flights. If an organisation is paying for your flights, you will fly the cheapest possible way everywhere, right? So I flew with China Southern Airlines.
And a big bloke like you on a cheap airline.
China Southern. I flew from Brisbane to Guangzhou, Guangzhou to Beijing, Beijing to Almaty, Almaty to Astana over 38 hours.
Just hops. Changing planes each time, or just getting out?
Guangzhou was getting out in a refuel. Beijing was a full change of plane. And Almaty,
each one of those stops you had to get out of the plane. It wasn't just stopping and getting back into the air.
Yeah, that's right. So
how many hours total?
38 on the way there, and it was 44 on the way home.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty.
The worst I've ever done is Japan to England, and I had to do a couple of stops, and I counted that it was 50 hours before I went, like waking up in the morning at 8 o'clock in the
Yeah, like
morning.
hotel to hotel or door to door kind of thing.
And
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
to the digs in London
Yeah.
after I'd got out of Heathrow and found the bus and got there. It was like,
Yeah.
50 hours. It's like,
So I get to Kazakhstan finally.
yeah.
There's many other multi stories I'm skipping over because otherwise we'll just do a whole podcast in Kazakhstan. But I get to Almaty, so this is my first. Sorry,
I do want to talk about comedy, so
I'll backtrack one
and
point
the
just because this
announcing
is comedy. So I get backtrack to Beijing. I'm trying to board my flight. Check in for my flight from Beijing to Almaty, and they want to see my visa. Now, what I didn't know at the time is that with an airline, if they let you board an international flight without citing your visa, if I get turned away and have to fly back home, that's at their expense.
all right.
Right? So they want to make sure you get the visa to enter the country. So they want to see my visa. It's 2 o'clock in the morning in Beijing. How many people do you reckon can read Cyrillic? Like 0, apparently. So there's a lot of panic about whether to let me on this flight or not. I don't know what's going on. They eventually just go,
They bite the bullet.
we'll go for it. So I get on board. I get a couple of hours later. I'm arriving in Almaty. I arrive at whatever their immigration section is called, and this gigantic guy, like just huge.
A guy your size is telling me gigantic
He's
guy.
bigger than me.
I'm talking Bob Sapp here, yeah.
He's probably a good 130, 140 kilos, like a head like a bowling ball, and he's just checking people as they come through. Yeah, visa, travel insurance, visa, travel insurance. Get to him, and he goes, visa, and I pull out my PDF, which I've printed in like 6 different copies, hand it to him. He looks at me and looks at this. He goes, "It's not visa." Next, I'm like, "What do you mean next? Like, what do I do?" He said, "There's no visa. This is a letter introduction. You take to embassy. You get visa from embassy. This letter." Oh. This was not clearly explained to me. I was going, what do I do with this?
So that was for you and her?
Yeah. Yep. We both had the same deal. And we were standing there, and shit you not, last ditch effort, I saw that he had cauliflower ears.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not familiar, cauliflower ears usually come from either wrestling sports, boxing, or rugby. Like those are pretty much the 3 ways you get cauliflower ears.
Number 3 in rugby.
There you go. So, Kazakhstan, not renowned for their rugby. Don't typically produce good boxers, but they do a bit of wrestling. I thought I'll just give it a shot. And I said, "Excuse me, are you a wrestler?" And I didn't have cauliflower ears. I still don't know why I couldn't get them.
A badge of honour, yeah. I didn't get them from playing rugby.
Kind of annoyed. I said, "Are you a wrestler?" And he goes, "Oh, you a wrestler?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, why you come here?" I said, "World Championships, belt wrestling." He goes, "Oh, you compete in World Championships, belt." All of a sudden, his English is great, right? And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm competing like in 2 days." And he's like, "Oh, this is not your visa." I'm like, "Well, what can I do?" He goes, no problem. $90 US. I stamp now, no problem. Paid him $90. Got stamped.
Oh dear.
Straight through, no problems. So
good thing you had $90 US.
I know. I would have paid him whatever he asked for. But anyway, so that was my entry into Kazakhstan. I'll stop there. There's other Kazakh stories. But
that's a fabulous story. I'm glad. Now, as I said, we've done the judo, and you're doing a couple other things that I wanted to chat with you about. Let's start with the comedy. I met you at the Sit Down Comedy Club, and you mentioned something about your work wife. And I was like, oh, that's such a great thing, because I'd just been called that by my boss.
Oh, nice.
And it was like the person you can say anything to and it won't get back to HR. I was like, oh, that's such a cool definition. And now I understand why my boss called him his work wife. And I'm like, oh, this is great, because it's a brilliant term. And I think you get good laughs with that.
Yeah.
I remember one time at door 84, 3 of you were sitting at the table, and I like spotted the work wife. I said, "You the work wife?" Cracked all 3 of you up, and I said, "Oh, it's just for them."
Yeah, it's quite funny.
Yeah. So how long have you been doing comedy now?
Since May. So
since May.
So what's that, about 4 months, 5 months?
Right. And how much material do you have now that you're sure about?
Oh, about 30 seconds.
All right. So you're still trying out stuff and rearranging
still trying new
it?
stuff. Yeah, I've probably got reliably 7 to 8 minutes. I think is okay.
That you're happy will get the
that I'm
laughs
happy
you
we'll
think
get a
that-
laugh. Yeah, depending on the room.
Depending on the room.
A little bit, yeah. Like I've tried probably.
Because door 84 and the sit down, they're not the same. They're a different vibe.
Yeah, 100%. And some of the suburban pub ones I've done too have been like completely different. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, because you worked as a bouncer before at the
yeah.
Rum Jungle, and then
yes.
recently I saw on Facebook you were going back to the Rum Jungle to do comedy.
That was fantastic.
It was good, was it? You were
good.
able to like get, because these people were your people.
They were in a way,
and
yeah.
You were back home, and they were cheering you on.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, they weren't really from the same era, so like, it wasn't like they. But
you were the OG of the neighbourhood.
Yeah, that's right. So that was fun. It was a good room. So shout out to James O'Connell for that. He did a good job getting people in the room. So
he does a good job running
sold out
venues. Yeah.
So anytime you can sell out
once they've already paid, they're prepared to laugh.
That's right. Yeah. And it was packed too. It was nice and condensed. Yeah. So the laughter was pretty infectious once people started laughing.
And you got good laughs with your 7 minutes of stuff that you think is worthwhile.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And that was a very specific routine. Like I stuck very tightly to the Rum Jungle material for that.
Right.
So I've probably done about 15 to 18 minutes worth of unique material over the last couple of months. And I've just started doing a new set on living in Melbourne during COVID, which has been kind of fun. Just sort of stretching myself to get beyond just telling stories and trying to write more authentic jokes that aren't just my life.
Have you done any comedy courses to learn how to craft the material?
Yeah, I did. Well, I won't say a course, but I did a workshop with Gavin from Vivenco Comedy.
From where?
Vivenco, I think it is.
Right. I don't know them.
Yeah, he's a Tasmanian guy, but he came up and did a couple of workshops up here a few months ago, and that was good. That was a useful. I did a lot of online sort of like research and homework and watching some of the comedians on YouTube and I saw the comedian. I guess those who analyse comedy.
I'm guilty of that. I'll sit down in an audience and did this with these guys I'd helped start up in Japan. Two guys who had a double act sort of thing. They were English speakers, brand new foreigners. And I'd been running shows in English every now and again for the English-speaking community. And they came along and did some stuff, and then they took out on their own, and they did wonderfully.
Yeah.
But I went along to watch them, and they had an hour and a half worth of material, and I'm sitting in the audience, looking at the audience. And one of them goes to me after the show, "I saw you analysing the audience." It's my thing.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I do it in a second language now.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so comedy's been really... It's been good for me because I've been a public speaker since high school. Like speaking in public has been not something that's ever worried me.
What did you do first with this public speaking?
Like just the normal stuff that you do as a kid, like when you have to give an oral presentation in English class, and then when I was grade 12, I was school captain.
Well done.
And one of my teachers said that they needed to put someone forward to do a Lions Youth of the Year, like a speaking competition. They didn't have anyone.
So for the Lions Club?
It's like but they sponsor like a big tournament.
Public speaking thing, all right, like a Toastmasters or something.
Yeah, they do like regional little trials, and then they do heats, and then it comes to get the winner sort of thing.
And you presented 12 minutes of...
stand up. No, not exactly right.
Of material for public speaking rather than comedy.
That's right, yeah.
So, and you, I imagine, peppered it with a few jokes.
Yeah, I did. If I remember correctly, I pretty much plagiarized it straight from a motivational book my mum had bought me. Made a bit of a life coaching as much as you ever could from a 17-year-old.
Amateurs plagiarize, professionals steal.
Well, I stole it.
That's an old joke. I stole it.
That was just, I got basically thrown into it because I was a school captain, and obviously I'd given a few speeches along the way at school.
You have to give
you do the assemblies and all that kind of stuff. So she said you could do this, and I was probably pretty nervous when I went up the first time, but then I started winning stuff, and I really like winning. I'm a very good winner.
You're a bit competitive, apparently.
I'm very competitive with things. The only people who don't think life is a competition of losers.
I remember it was a magazine I was reading where this girl was saying she doesn't mind being second. Everybody else wants to be first. I like that attitude.
Yeah. No, I'm very competitive. So once I start winning stuff, I start like, right, well, I need to get better at this then. I've apparently got a natural
Once
talent
you know
for
you've
it.
got a chance. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, well, if I can do this well without trying, and what can I do if I do try?
Yeah.
So I started studying professional speakers and trying to what they do, I'd go to the other heats and like stalk my competition and see what they did. And stuff. So I had a pretty good run that year in high
That is very
school.
competitive.
Yeah, I had a pretty good run that year in high school doing public speaking. When I went to uni, what I first thought I was going to do was become a drama teacher,
All right.
a drama and English teacher. So I did that for the first year. Decided I couldn't handle being back in a classroom forever.
So you have actually trained as an actor.
A little bit, yeah. Not, I wouldn't claim that, but I've done some stage acting.
Drama in university, right?
Yeah.
So 2 years.
1 year.
1 year of drama at university.
Yeah.
Okay.
So did 3-4 years of drama in high school and then 1 year at university.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then
What sort of roles were you given?
oh geez, it was mostly stuff written by little local Brisbane playwrights. I don't think it was anything that I don't think
So there wasn't
anything.
Shakespeare in there.
No, I didn't do any Shakespeare. I think we did like a practice run of Macbeth at some point, but it wasn't like a performance. It was just sort of we just did some. I didn't remember the names of the plays. Oh, we did Waiting for Godot. It's a well-known one, but
It's a very boring play.
it's not brilliant, is it? I'm so glad
I
you
don't
said
know
that.
how that play ever got produced by anyone. You watch a
It
version.
goes nowhere.
It's like two old guys drunk and lost and.
It's probably the only
homeless.
one that's a recognised play. But yeah, so
I think
that was fun.
it's Bertolt Brecht.
yes,
Did that?
something like that.
Either him or someone else.
It's 20 years
Beckett
ago
or-
now. My
I
brain
forget
is-
which one.
I've
but
been,
it's
I've, been,
like-
I've been hitting the head and drunk a lot since then.
Yeah, it's like that play. I'm thinking to myself, the guy just wrote it just to see if it would get produced.
Yeah, and
and
we
it
are
got
still-
produced.
We're still studying it 50 years later.
Don't know why.
Yeah. So yeah, that was that, and then basically I just kind of as I started working, I'd always kind of find myself in spots where I was either teaching something, or I was instructing something, or I was just giving presentations or something, and just speaking in front of a crowd was always comfortable for me. And then I just got to a point then I was doing a lot of conference MC work, so I was doing just by virtue of my profession, which we'll get into if you want to, became a security consultant, and I started MCing security conferences.
So you consider security a profession?
Yeah, it's what it pays me.
So you were
none of the other things pay me any money.
At the Rum Jungle. You were a bouncer,
Yes,
which is technically a security professional.
I had a security license. Yes.
Yeah, and I'd given up being a bouncer basically when they started saying you had to get tickets.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't want to do it anymore because it is a really dangerous
It
field.
is, yeah.
And probably my last night, I don't think I went back to work after this, but like I said, I'm littler than you, and most bouncers are your size, especially the Māori ones. Some of my guys and the Tongans and stuff like that. And compared to you and them, I'm just this tiny little guy. And there was these two guys who were, I think, 100 and 105 kilos, and I was 87 trying to get into 85 for the tournament. And there was this one big guy, he's about as big as you, and this little guy's drunk and he's causing trouble, and the big guy's headbutted him.
Oh no.
And we've been watching the little guy for a little while. We're just three of us standing there. And it's like we have to grab the big guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the two big guys, they're 100 and 105 kilos, one of each of them grabs one of his arms. And I have to get behind him and put his head in a neck lock. And when you're standing in that position and he does that, you go up into the air. And I'm like, oh, I'm off the ground here. I only weigh 7 kilos. So I bring the knee back and I put it back into his back of his knee. And he drops down again and I squeeze really hard. And you got your ear right here with the backbone. And his neck just goes,
Oh no.
and I freaked.
Yeah.
He went out.
Yeah.
And the guy's holding his arms and they're dragging him out.
Yeah.
And then his head hits the pavement out front.
Oh no. It's the worst.
And I just looked at that thinking, oh, I'm going to jail.
Yep.
And then he got up.
Oh, good.
But
I've had that moment as well. I've had that exact moment. Yeah.
I could not face being a bouncer again after that. It wasn't really the license, it was that. I was like, no, that's the last one.
You know what? So the first couple of years that I was bouncing, I didn't intend to, like, it wasn't something I was called to.
You never
in
into
any way. It was like I was just sick of 2-minute noodles and leaving the pub before it was my shout, basically. So I was just trying to get some money.
You are a competitive fella, aren't you?
So I was like, well, at the time I was on the Australian judo team.
Yeah.
You know, I was 18 years old. I was
Well, it does your size and that background.
and I was like 6'3", 120 kilos
Yeah.
on the Aussie judo team. Like I could get a job tomorrow working bouncing that.
Yeah.
Like, literally, I got recruited before I had my license. They said, as soon as you get your license, give us a call.
Yeah.
So, and then they put me in all the most violent places because I was too dumb to say no to stuff.
Yep. But
and
you were also capable of looking after yourself.
Yeah, I learned a lot on the fly as well.
Oh, you do,
yeah.
because it's not the same sort of fighting.
No, I've not.
Judo's got rules.
Yeah,
They
100%.
don't have rules in the street.
Yeah, these pricks are actually trying to hurt me. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When they come back with a knife or a broken bottle,
100%.
that's scary.
So, but after I realised I kind of enjoyed. I did enjoy the excitement of it. Like I enjoyed the unpredictability. I always said that bouncing was like 99% boredom and 1% sheer terror, and you start to look forward to the sheer terror.
Yeah, it is addictive.
It's a lot of standing up.
For a man.
Yeah.
And I know the
It's
next
very
one of the
primal.
questions I want to talk to you about is
yeah.
a podcast I listened to a little bit of about women being trained in martial arts or
Yeah.
in self-defense.
Yeah.
And for a man, that is an addictive thing. Like with the point you made earlier about, I'm good at this. Without doing anything, without trying, I'm good at it.
Yeah.
I've got a chance.
Yeah.
So then you start to get this addictive personality develop, and it can be quite dangerous, and it leads to a dark place.
Absolutely. Violence absolutely does.
Oh.
And especially as a young man, like I was 18, 19, 20, 21. By the time I was 22, I was pretty much out. But during those years, I mean, the validation you get from being good at violence, and you're always surrounded by young girls who are single or single-ish, and you've got.
It's amazing to watch
you're
that
popular.
you're talking about, because the girls that egg on the violence.
Yeah. It's basically we're just reverting back to being chimps. Basically, is what we're looking at there.
We're looking at primal behaviour. That's for sure.
Yeah. So that was. I had to check myself occasionally because I consider myself a pretty peaceful, calm person. Even back then, I was, and I like to be thinking I'm a pretty moral person. And there were times where I caught myself overstepping, where I was like, you know what, this is too much. I'm taking out frustrations on someone who didn't deserve it.
Yep.
Yeah, like yes, he did something. Yes, it's not. I'm not technically breaking the law because I'm using reasonable force, but I'm using more force than I have to.
Yep.
Because I can. And that was like, okay, I need to take a couple of weeks off. I need to hang out with some positive people because after a while, you're only talking to the worst.
Yep.
You don't talk to people having a good time.
That's true, because the only people you have to interact with are the ones that have to get thrown out.
100%. And looking back on it, half the people you're working with aren't much better than them. So you start putting that in context. You're
when you get roid rage in the Boston, it's like, no.
Yeah.
And when the most violent person in the club is a friend of the boss, that's not fun.
So I was really lucky in that I did that for about, I say full time for about 3 years, and then quasi part time in doing other jobs in security around that time. So
there's a difference between the type of security that's necessary to a shopping mall.
Yeah. So like I went and did corporate buildings, and I did some suit and tie work, and I was doing some bodyguarding work, and I was doing bits and pieces. We see
Famous people you bodyguard?
Only short term, like sort of short term fill-in gigs.
Name drop.
Russell Crowe's probably the biggest star.
Oh yeah, I met him on a film once.
Yeah, nice guy. He mostly wanted a drinking buddy more than a bodyguard.
You don't get paid to have a drink with Russell Crowe? I'll do that any day, yeah.
I was so terrified of losing my job. I was like, nope, can't do it. But he was a nice guy. That was just after the phone throwing thing in Los Angeles.
Right.
So he was walking, say, you big fella, stand behind me, make sure no one throws a phone at me.
I had a conversation with him on the film Blood Oath.
Oh, yeah?
He was quite demeaning in his attitude towards the guy who was Jason Donovan.
Okay.
It's probably before your time, this actor. Oh, I don't know. Is it?
No, I know him. I know of him. I don't know much of his work.
And I was like, but he's famous. Yeah, that doesn't mean he's an actor. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then he was I would say a bit part. He was with Brian Brown and some famous Japanese actors and George Takei, and he wasn't that big a star.
Yeah.
But then he went on to be this huge star, and I went, maybe there might be something to what he said.
Yeah. So, but I was fortunate in that I could see what I wanted to do beyond that, and I think the story the point I was going to make before was like as I realized I was enjoying the security side, I enjoyed protecting people.
Yeah,
that's what I enjoyed. I enjoyed the
reason.
protection.
Yes.
I enjoyed being the line or the barrier between the good people and the bad people.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that moral.
I'm getting goosebumps
black and
right
whiteness,
now,
right?
Because I was actually talking with Ashwin last week about the same thing. The warrior studies war in order to preserve peace.
That's right.
That's its purpose.
Well, when I first started my first martial arts club, the slogan was "Empowering the Peaceful Warrior."
There you go.
So that was that's what, and that resonated with me. And I initially wanted to be a police officer. I was going to go join the cops.
Good on you.
And that was the first time I had to go to court was I went to court 3 times as a witness for the police, just different things that happened.
Funny that you get into a pub like the Rum Jungle and away you go.
Yeah, never charged. Just for the record, I was never charged. I was always a witness for the prosecution.
You've heard the joke I do. These hands are registered with the police. It's just a fingerprint.
That's good. That was a pretty scary experience. I was like 19 years old, getting grilled by a barrister, and
so you were giving evidence.
Yeah, giving evidence about his client.
But he's still pounding away.
His only game plan was to discredit me and make me look like a bully and a thug who provoked his client. That was basically all he was trying to do. And I was unprepared for it because the prosecution can't coach you because they can't coach their witness. So I was pretty much on my own. And I was too dumb to have taken legal representation. I just thought I was going to show up and tell them what happened and go away.
So even a witness for the prosecution needs to have legal representation?
I would have taken some coaching from our in-house legal squad before.
Oh, I see. All right.
I was 19. I didn't know what I didn't know. I got paid $36 for missing a day of work. That was not ideal.
Well, there you go.
But afterwards, the prosecutor actually said to me, he said, "You did really well." He said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "What do you plan to do with your life?" And I said, "Oh, I'm hoping to join you guys." And he said, "Get out of bouncing." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "It's too easy for you to make a really big mistake accidentally."
Yeah, like I nearly did.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was a couple of years later I had a similar sort of thing where I choked a guy out, and training, you choke people unconscious on I won't say a regular basis, but it's not uncommon for people to fall asleep.
In karate, it's not the same.
Yeah, true.
But in judo, it's
it happens by accident
and
sometimes, and sometimes it's not by accident.
I mean, like in karate, I've knocked a kid out with a kick.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, grab him.
Yeah.
Wake up, please.
But usually when you strangle someone, and that it sounds really dramatic, but basically you occlude the flow of blood to the brain.
Yep.
After however long it takes, 6 to 12 seconds, usually the person will start to black out. They'll go to sleep. 2 to 3 seconds later, they wake up. They're fine.
Yeah.
That's how it typically works. When you mix in drugs, alcohol, unknown medical conditions, someone who's actively trying to kill you at the time, and you choke that person unconscious, sometimes it's less predictable.
Yep.
And I had one at the front of the Exchange Hotel in Brisbane.
Across the road from where we used to work at the Victory.
Yeah. And I choked the guy out, and he didn't wake up. He wouldn't wake up. And I reckon for the minute that he was unconscious,
your future is flashing.
I had written off every dream I ever had in my life, like it was done. It was over.
I told you my story earlier.
Yeah.
Same feeling. It's
100%.
like,
And that was
there goes your entire life.
When he woke up and he woke up and started swearing at me again, I was like, "Oh, thank Christ, you're alive."
I don't care what you say, dude. Just go home.
Yeah,
when that guy stood up, I said, "I think you should go home."
I think I went and bought like half a pizza for myself.
And comfort food.
Anyway, so I got out of that. The short version, I guess, from there is that I identified that the policing thing didn't work out. Variety of life circumstances just wasn't the right time. I was already teaching martial arts and self-defense. Had developed a real passion for understanding reality of violence, not the martial arts version of violence.
Is that where the podcast came from?
Eventually, and I started teaching like reality-based self-defense and
because karate and judo, both of them, combined, they're supposed to be jiu-jitsu and therefore a real fight style that is usable in the street. Yeah, right.
But it's only a fraction of what you need to know to be safe from violence. Right?
Yeah, but the podcast you showed me, I listened to one, and the lady was talking about the difference between self-defense for women and martial arts.
100%, yeah.
And I'm like, there is a difference.
Yeah.
When you're a bouncer, you see it.
Yeah.
But not every karate car or judo car gets to see the difference.
Yeah, well, if you're really good at it, you shouldn't really be using your physical skills, right? You make better decisions, you de-escalate people, you choose better people to have in your life, you don't hang around when people get into fights, you don't, like, there's all these things
There's just the distance. It's like, as soon as, like, one of the stories, I've been writing stories, and some of them have been published, and one of these stories I've got a fight scene, and the lead character steps to just outside of arm's length of the guy that's obviously going to start a fight. It's part of the mental makeup. You don't get into a position where you can get hit.
Yep.
And you don't. You try to talk the person out rather than drag them out.
Yeah, 100%.
But that's, not always possible.
Have you ever read any books from the novelist Barry Eisler?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, here's one you should check out. Eisler. Barry Eisler is a former CIA agent in real life, and a judo black belt,
All right.
and a karate black belt, I believe. Based in Japan for a while.
You've read any of Eric von Lustbader?
I haven't. No.
There's a series of books about this guy, Nicholas, who is a martial artist of some renown, and the fight scene work is quite nice.
Yeah, so I was going to say Barry Eisler's fight scenes. As you're reading them, I haven't found another author who writes a fight scene as well as he does.
All right, I might send you my story because I'm going to send it to a competition at the end of this month.
Okay.
Anyway,
yeah, so sidetrack, but so I guess the short version is
there isn't a plan for this.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I don't know if you want to go anywhere else with it.
I've got a list of things I want.
Feel free. Feel free to interrupt me at any stage. But yeah, so while I'd been through a bunch of stuff where I got accepted into the Queensland Police Academy.
All right.
But then my girlfriend at the time had a breakdown and couldn't work. And
ouch.
What'd
you do to her?
We haven't got enough whiskey for that conversation.
I'll have a different version of this show then, won't I?
Yeah, no, that'll be a different conversation altogether.
I'll have a bar set up, and I'll
need to go under my stage name for that one.
Interviewers, the interviewees are going to be sitting down and have a drink.
But she couldn't work, so I had to, and the academy wage was less than my mortgage repayment.
Oh no!
So I had to choose between going into the police and losing my house, or I thought, I'll just delay. I'll go again in 6 months or 12 months or whatever.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I had an application in for. What was the order I went in? I think I'd put in an application for the federal police as well.
All right.
As a special agent.
I'm not allowed to say that apparently. Sorry.
No, it's highly inappropriate. But their starting salary and their training salary.
Yeah, actually, you know why it's inappropriate right now? Because you're big enough to beat me up.
But their salary was higher, so I had an application in there. Hadn't heard anything for a bit. So when the Queensland Police thing went through, I was like, I'd also applied for Army Reserves along the way.
Oh, wow.
I just wanted to do something in that space. And I'd planned to do Queensland Policing and Army Reserves at the same time because you get double leave then, which is just a fun quirk. You get an additional 4 weeks of leave for military leave from the police. So you get 10 weeks a year off and 4 weeks doing military stuff and 6 weeks just bugging around.
Wow.
So I thought that would be a cool combination. But then when the police thing wasn't going to work out, I said, you know what, I'm interested in going full-time officer entry for the Army. I passed the test and had all the scores I needed for it.
So you would have been a captain?
No, I would have gone in as lieutenant.
Yeah.
If I'd gone in as I would have gone as lieutenant. And that was all starting to progress, and then it hit a snag because I'd already had a knee reconstruction when I was 17.
Oh wow!
And they needed a letter from my surgeon saying that I was fit and healthy to do military service. And of course, being the time period it was, my surgeon was like on long service leave in Switzerland or something and couldn't be contacted for 6 months. So I had to wait until he got back. They wouldn't accept a letter from anyone else. So I had to wait. And in the time that I was waiting, AFP reached out to me or sent me a letter saying that you've been progressed to the next round, stand by for an interview date in your city. Like, great. So I called the ADF and I said, guys, I just need to park this. I've got this thing with the AFP coming up. Yeah, great. Chase your dreams. Do what you need to do. And then I waited and I waited and I waited. And then there was a change in government and Kevin Rudd came in, immediately slashed the federal law enforcement budget. And
wow.
I got about 2 months later, I got an email saying, due to change in policy, we're no longer direct recruitment to federal agent. You are now, but you're welcome to reapply for community policing ACT. And I was like, if I want to do community policing, I'm not going to freaking Canberra, where I can do nothing and be cold all the time. Right?
Oh, my brother worked there for a while. I went and visited him. I know how cold it is.
Yeah, so I was like, no. At that point, I'd become aware that Queensland Health had a job called aggressive behaviour management instructor.
So that's where you got into this as a profession.
That was kind of the turning point for me.
Right.
So I was like, okay, cool. Let's have a look at that. Couldn't get into that course unless I was in the healthcare. You had to be in healthcare to get onto the ABM instructor course. So I went and took a 9-month job as a security and fire protection officer at Prince Charles Hospital, and which was a fantastic learning curve for me because I went from equating violence in some way to drugs and alcohol and bad decisions to then seeing this whole other side of violence, which has got nothing to do with people being bad people. It could be mental health, it could be geriatric health, it could be dementia, it could be a mum who has been sitting in an emergency department for 8 hours with a screaming toddler who's just lost it.
Yep.
It could be someone who's just received news that their child has died. It could be like someone who's woken up from surgery and is disorientated. Like there's all these different, like dealing with someone who's actually psychotic. Like we say that person's a psycho. No, wait till you deal with someone who's actually psychotic.
Yeah.
Right. It's a completely different thing, and you develop this empathy for these people that can do awful things at times, because you start to learn a little bit about their story.
Well, you did say earlier that you felt yourself going over that edge.
Yeah.
So I was talking with Ashwin about it as well. He used to say comedy's like you're on the edge of an abyss. And there's this whirlpool out there. And when I came back to Australia after 2.5 decades in Japan, all of the comedians seemed to be out there in the whirlpool. And we were talking about how dark and how deep and how squashy. And it's like when you see that, when you feel it, when you experience it, when it's become experiential, you get the empathy because you know you could be there.
100%.
And it's like an old Christian thing, there but for the grace of God go I.
100%. And that, I use that line all the time when I'm trying to teach people. I spent years teaching verbal de-escalation skills and teaching negotiation skills. And my last job before my current position, I spent 6 years training everyone from cabin crew in the sky through to nursing staff, through to staff working in parliamentary offices, all over the country.
All of this is nothing to do with choking a guy out.
Nothing, not a single thing. But about how to recognise warning signs, pick up on problematic behaviours, de-escalate early, or get themselves to safety as quickly as possible. That was basically what I trained. And one thing that I would say a lot, especially if I was training security teams or people that were a little bit more physical orientated or action orientated, or maybe a little bit more on the edge of possibly just
where the real
preempting,
dangerous individuals physically are.
Remind yourself, never for the grace of God go I. When you're looking at this person's behaviour, the only way you're going to de-escalate them, the only way you're going to de-escalate them is with empathy. You cannot reliably de-escalate someone that you don't have empathy for. You have to be able to look at them and go, you're acting in a way that I wouldn't act, but what would I have had to have been through for me to act that way?
Yeah.
Because at some point, if you have to go back to being a newborn baby, no one ever holds up a newborn baby and goes, this will be an awful human being. Right? Yeah. Something has happened to that child or that adult in that time that has led to this behaviour now. And it's not up to us to judge whether that was their fault or not. Right?
That's true.
So all you got is what you got. You got the human in front of you that has wants and needs and ambitions and desires, and what can you do?
Which have been squashed.
Yeah.
Obviously.
What can you do to help them get close to what they want in a way that keeps everybody safe?
That's a good idea. Brilliant.
And that's kind of what I've been teaching for a long time.
I'm glad. I'm glad someone's out there. I wasn't a very good instructor. I remember trying to teach girls karate, getting the ki, getting the spirit yell. It's like, yeah.
There's
That's not exactly what I'm asking you for.
It's not real violence, but there's nothing that I like more than going to a good Kyokushin club and hearing that ki coming from a block away.
Oh, yeah. They're happy doing it.
Yeah.
It's a release. It's a brilliant thing. It got me out of trouble one day.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, it wasn't the ki. It was the ibuki. I got knocked down with a technique I missed. I didn't know what it was that hit me, but there was 2 Korean taekwondo blokes. There were bouncers in a club across the road, and they didn't like me, and they'd come to talk to me. And one of them knocked me down, and I didn't see it coming. And I got straight back up and went, and these guys literally went, ooh. And I was like, oh, I'm glad I knew how to do that. And all I was doing was getting my wind back. But the podcast I listened to a little bit of was about a girl or a lady who was teaching self-defense to women and the difference between the martial arts practice and the actually getting beneficial techniques into the apparatus of a girl. What was all of that about?
So, by all means, go listen to the episode. So Mary Stevens was the instructor. I assume it was the most recent episode you will listen to.
Whatever you sent me, I went, sure. I'll have a listen to a little bit of this, and then the rest of my life started to take over, and I went, cool. I need to know more about that.
So Mary's a karate instructor, but she's also got a passion for studying the real application of how you manage and prevent violence. And the major thing, I guess, is if your goal is to teach someone to be a martial artist, that's fine, and that's a noble goal.
You want to
and
get a
there's nothing
black
wrong with
belt,
learning
you want to
martial
learn how
arts
to
for
do
the sake of
kata,
it. Like, and lots of people get lots of life benefits from that, and that's no problem.
There's a lot of health benefits involved in it.
Like I do martial
I have
arts.
lots of broken pieces of body because of the thigh kicks, but
I mean, I do martial arts now because I like one of my daughters is doing judo, and I like spending that time with her, and I like just doing skills.
How old is she?
She's 8.
All right.
So I enjoy that.
You don't have much trouble throwing her then.
Sure, low center of gravity though. I got to bend my knees a really long way.
All right.
But that's like my martial arts now has got nothing to do with self protection.
Yeah.
Like I'm not. I don't engage. I don't go places where violence happens. Right. It's not me anymore. So but that podcast was mostly about just if your goal is to make your students safer from violence, if that's the actual goal, you need to understand where the violence actually is in their life. Right? And for women, overwhelmingly, the violence is in the people that they invite into their life.
Yep.
Right. It's partner selection. It's the people they trust with their children. It's people they live with or room with. It's the friends of friends that won't leave them alone. It's those. That's where the threats come from. Right. The women, we have a global issue with women being murdered by intimate partners.
Yep.
So, is it useful to know how to do a triangle choke? Maybe. Is it more useful to not to recognize those warning signs? Would a woman be able
to do it to her man?
Maybe.
Generally speaking, she's 30 kilos
she can
lighter
kick really
than him.
hard. Maybe, but is it much better to just recognize those toxic behaviors early and not invite that person into your life?
Yep.
Definitely.
Brilliant.
So that's really, it's more about like, what does my student need?
I think it's a song by Taylor Swift. Something along the lines of, "Are you the poison that I'm drawn to?"
Yeah.
And she's juxtaposing it with some other thing.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of therapy stuff there. I mean, for years I was drawn to broken women that I wanted to fix.
All right, we're going through a therapy session now, are we?
And I was like,
okay, the next question I asked
took me a little while. I was like, you know what? Maybe I just need.
Should we show this podcast to your wife and your daughters? Oh no.
Yeah, it's true. But
you seem to be doing all right there, by the way.
Got there.
I mean, she's apparently willingly allowing you to do this adventure as you bridge from what you were doing into being, like full-time professional announcer, comedian and stuff like that. So that was a nice thing to have you say on stage. I was like, I'd like to meet her. I think she's nice. Yeah,
no, she's lovely. I've done very well with her.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, no, look, I think that's ultimately like I still feel very drawn to one of my purposes, and I don't subscribe to this idea that people do that everybody just does one thing. Like I think. I think I watched a TED talk once, which very politely referred to people like me as multi-potentiates.
Oh, that's a nice phrase. I like that.
Which basically means like I can't decide what I like to do. Like I like to do lots of things.
We were talking with Ashwin about ADD and comedians. Same principle. It's like I've got this, I've got that, I've got that, I've got this, I've got that.
And, I can tell you right now that if I just did comedy full time, I'd hate it within a year.
Oh, I understand that one.
I wouldn't like. I've already even just doing a handful of gigs.
Yeah,
there were some nights where I'm like, I do not feel like making people laugh tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's been a stressful day.
When it's your job, and that's how you make a living.
Yeah,
I have gone like in Japan, doing my show, and it's like for you're doing 7 minutes, 15 minutes tops, right? I'm trying to remember how to say that bit, that bit, that bit, that bit, and there's a bunch of repetition involved in that, which wears you out mentally. Right. And then you have to go and do that bit that you've memorized on stage, and it has to be the same because you know it works, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm doing this in Japanese for 12 years, 15 years, and I'm getting divorced. And I'm just starting to rant about the marriage breakdown in the middle of the street doing a street show. And it's like, guy in the audience says, "Who broke up with whom?" "Yeah, it was my fault, all right." If I could have sworn in Japanese, I would have sworn at him. I was like, yeah, I know that feeling.
But so I like to do multiple things. I still think that one of my main purposes is to educate people and keep people safe.
So is that being done in workshops and things like that, or is it on your podcast?
So my podcast is the main avenue for that now.
Do you get paid for that?
Minimal. Like I did take a bit of a 2-year period where I didn't really update it very much, and a lot of the monetization drifted off during that time.
You're going to have to teach us how to monetize this one. This is only the second.
Yeah, I'm not the right person. I'm sure it's cost me more money than it's made me.
All right.
But no, so that's the main avenue I use for that. My work professionally at the moment, I'm an operations manager for a security training company.
So when I first saw you were talking about the fact that you'd quit working and then were branching into being the announcer comedian, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was kind of more of a bit. I had...
So it's not true.
I had
You told a lie on stage. Reprobate you.
It's true that I had actually quit my job. I
Here's a
left my
joke.
consulting job.
This is a stock one you may wish to use.
Sure.
Some of this I've made up. Some of it is true. I'll leave it up to you to decide which.
Most of that routine was good, except I wasn't moving into full-time comedy.
So you are actually doing a proper job.
I am doing a proper job.
As well as these things. And it's not true that the wife has allowed you to get away from doing a proper job.
No, it's not entirely true.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, the wife would be fine with it. Landlord, not so much. So.
Well, all right.
Yeah.
So if people wanted to hear your podcast, where do they go?
Just on whatever podcast platform you like to use, just look up Managing Violence Podcast.
Managing Violence Podcast. That's you, and that would be. Is that Joe Saunders or Joe?
It's under Joe Saunders for that one.
Is it? All right. Okay.
Yeah. So for those that are confused, Joe Sandow does just the performance stuff. So the comedy, the ring announcing.
All right. And the ring announcing, where's that at?
JoeSandow.com.
All right. So where do you do the ring announcing?
So at the moment, I've got the Impact Pro Wrestling on the Gold Coast, which runs out of Dreamworld Night Markets, give or take every month. And Venom Pro Wrestling, which runs out of Beanley, basically every month as well.
And you've got some Japanese connection now?
Yeah, so I don't know, I might look like an idiot if this doesn't go well. Saturday on
Nobody's going to see this anyway.
Yeah, no one's watching this anyway.
My three friends might, yeah.
So I've got a tryout for New Japan Pro Wrestling on Saturday.
So a tryout, that means you're going to go along and give them a free demonstration of you announcing basically for the ring.
So they're doing a tryout for wrestlers. So they're doing a wrestling tryout. And
so the wrestlers are trying out, and you simultaneously are trying out for the ring announcer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So a ring announcer is the guy that sits. He's got a colour commentator beside him, and they're both wearing a
couple of different
headphones
roles. So my role is actually more the in ring.
So you're in
the
the
following
middle...
contest is scheduled for one fall, and coming to the ring now.
So you introduce the competitors as they come on, and then you introduce the ref, and then you get off. And
that's pretty much it, and then announce the winners at the end.
Yeah. All right, okay.
So some places there's a little bit of commentary involved. From what I understand, on Saturday I'm going to get tried out doing the announcing and interviewing.
That's on the side on a table with the headphones and all of that.
Yeah, so we'll see.
Joe Rogan used to do that stuff, didn't he?
Yeah. So I think they're probably going to get me to do, like, if you're going to use the UFC analogy, be the Bruce Buffer and also the Joe Rogan in the cage doing the post-fight interviews kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
I think that's what they're going to get me to do. But I don't know. I'm just there to try not to make a fool of myself and hope for the best.
Well, I think you're doing a great job. I want to thank you again for coming along.
Thank you.
Those two T-shirts in there are 5L.
Nice.
Is that going to fit
that
you?
Will do.
Because I wear 5XL.
Nice.
And one, you can have a look at them now.
Good.
One of them is this one, Great Minds Like I Think.
I like that.
And the other one is my design that I gave to an artist to draw for me, which is the smashed avo on toast. So they're presents for you.
Thank you very much.
And I want to say thank you again and again for coming along. It's been absolutely fabulous having you here.
Pleasure.
Can't thank you enough for it.
Oh, thank you, Gareth.
You're welcome.
Thank you.